It doesn't begin with chaos. It begins after it. After things settle. After the noise fades. After there is finally nothing urgent left to handle. No message waiting. No decision pressing. No problem sitting quietly in the background demanding your attention. The day slows into something softer. The room becomes still. And for a moment, everything looks exactly the way you thought it should. This is what you've been moving toward. Less pressure. Less noise. Less constant demand. A life where things don't always need to be fixed. A space where you can finally just be. And now, you're in it. And yet, something doesn't feel stable. You sit still. Not because you're forcing yourself to. Because there's nothing pushing you to move. Your body is at rest. Your environment is calm. The air feels quiet around you. And still, there's something underneath it. Not anxiety. Not stress. Something more precise. A subtle lack of grounding. You shift slightly in your chair. Adjust your posture. Let your shoulders drop a little. You try to settle into the moment the way you imagine you should. But something inside you doesn't follow. You look around the room. Everything is in place. Nothing is missing. Nothing is wrong. And yet, you don't feel anchored inside it. You stay there longer. Just enough to notice the gap. Between what the moment is, and how it feels inside you. You reach for something. Not consciously. Your hand just moves. Your phone. You unlock it. Scroll for a few seconds. No intention. No purpose. Just movement. Something to orient yourself. Something to hold on to. You lock it again. Put it down. And almost immediately, the quiet returns. And with it, that same feeling. Unchanged. Still there. You lean back slowly. Exhale. Try to relax deeper into the chair. But there's a subtle tension that doesn't fully release. Not tight. Not obvious. Just present. As if something is missing that you can't quite name. You notice your mind beginning to move. Not toward anything specific. Just searching. Looking for something to engage with. Something to organize. Something to respond to. A thought appears. Maybe I should do something. It feels reasonable. Productive. Logical. But there is nothing that actually needs to be done. And so the thought hangs there, without direction. You sit there longer. And the absence of direction becomes more noticeable. Not freeing. Not relaxing. Slightly disorienting. You lean forward slightly. Elbows on your knees. And the realization begins to form. You don't feel stable when nothing is happening. That sentence lands quietly. But it stays. Because it explains something you felt many times but never named clearly. You thought stability meant calm. But this doesn't feel like stability. It feels like something is missing. You sit back slowly. And another thought begins to take shape. Not fully formed. Just present. Maybe stability, for you, has never meant stillness. You let that sit. Because it feels close to something real. You think about when you feel most like yourself. When you're solving something. Handling something. Navigating something. In those moments, you're clear. Decisive. Grounded. You know what to do next. Your attention has direction. Your actions have purpose. And that clarity feels like stability. But now, none of that is here. There is no next step. No problem. No immediate direction. And instead of feeling calm, you feel slightly lost. You stand. Walk slowly into the kitchen. Open a cabinet. Look inside. Close it again. The movement is automatic. But now, you can see it. You're not doing this because you need something. You're doing it because you don't know how to stay where you were. You walk back slowly. Sit again. And another layer appears. You're not uncomfortable with calm. You're uncomfortable with yourself inside calm. That lands deeper. Because now, the focus shifts. The problem is not the moment. The moment is fine. The problem is your relationship to it. When things are active, you respond. When things are calm, you don't know how to be. You sit there longer. Letting that settle. Because it doesn't feel dramatic. But it feels precise. You've built a version of yourself that functions extremely well in motion. In reaction. In engagement. You know how to handle things. You know how to adapt. You know how to move. But when that movement disappears, something else disappears with it. Orientation. You lean back slowly. And the realization deepens further. You don't just lose direction. You lose a sense of yourself. Your chest tightens slightly. Because that sentence is heavier than expected. You think about it more clearly now. When there's something happening, you know who you are inside it. You're the one solving. The one responding. The one managing. But when nothing is happening, who are you then? You sit there longer. And your mind doesn't answer. It searches. It tries to find something to attach to. A plan. A next step. A decision. Anything that gives you structure again. But there is nothing required. And that absence feels unfamiliar. You lean forward again. Hands loosely clasped. And the truth sharpens. You don't trust yourself when you're not reacting to something. That lands clean. Because it explains the instability. It's not that calm is uncomfortable. It's that you don't feel defined inside it. You exhale slowly. The room quiet. The light steady. And the final realization of this moment settles in. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is missing. But without something to respond to, you're not sure who you are in the moment. And that is why calm doesn't feel stable yet. By midday, the feeling hasn't gone away. It hasn't intensified either. It has simply become clearer. More structured. Less like a passing discomfort, and more like a pattern you can no longer pretend not to see. You move through the day slowly. Not because you are tired. Because your attention is no longer being pulled the way it usually is. You rinse a glass. Dry your hands. Open a drawer. Close it again. Small movements. Familiar movements. The body continuing what it knows how to do. But your awareness is somewhere else now. It is not on the action. It is underneath it. Tracing something deeper. You didn't just suddenly become uncomfortable in calm. You learned it. That sentence lands differently now. Because it removes the illusion that this is random. There was a process here. A repetition. A shaping. A life lived in a certain rhythm long enough for that rhythm to stop feeling like a condition, and start feeling like you. You sit down. Lean forward slightly. Elbows resting on your knees. And now your mind begins to reconstruct something deeper. Not just what you feel now. How you got here. There was a time when you did not need to ask these questions. Or at least, there was a time when the questions never surfaced. Not because you were more grounded. Because life kept giving you something to respond to. Something to hold. Something to fix. Something to move toward. And every time something appeared, you stepped into it. You handled it. Managed it. Moved through it. Solved it. Adapted to it. And in Those moments, something happened internally. You felt clear. You felt grounded. You felt like yourself. That part matters. Because this is where the misunderstanding begins. You thought that clarity meant identity. You thought that groundedness meant self-trust. You thought that decisiveness meant stability. But now, looking back, something sharper becomes visible. What you were feeling in those moments was not just competence. It was recognition. Recognition of a self you knew how to inhabit. The one who responds. The one who figures things out. The one who does not freeze. The one who keeps things moving. The one who knows what to do next. That version of you became familiar. Not because it was your deepest self. Because it was the self most consistently activated. And over time, familiarity began to look like truth. You lean back slightly. And the realization sharpens. You didn't just handle problems. You built your identity around them. That sentence should land hard. Because it changes the entire frame. This is not just about habits. Not just about stress. Not just about a nervous system that got used to movement. It is deeper than that. You were not only reacting to life. You were becoming someone inside that reaction. A self was being reinforced. Again and again. Every time something needed you. Every time clarity arrived through external demand. Every time purpose appeared because something was unfinished. Every time action gave shape to what otherwise would have felt undefined. You did not just get used to activity. You got used to knowing yourself through it. That is the wound. And that is why calm feels so destabilizing. Because calm does not give you that mirror back. It does not reflect the version of you who knows what to do. It does not activate the self you have spent years learning to trust. It simply removes the prompt. And in the absence of the prompt, you are left with something far more difficult than stress. You are left with yourself without instruction. You stand. Walk slowly toward the window. Look outside. Cars passing. People moving. Everything directed. Everything going somewhere. And suddenly, it mirrors something internal. Because for so long, your own inner life has functioned like that too. Not chaotic. Directed. Not broken. Mobilized. Not unstable. Responsive. And that responsiveness has been rewarded. That matters too. Because life does reward this. The responsive self is useful. Admirable. Dependable. Efficient. It makes decisions. It carries pressure. It organizes uncertainty. It turns ambiguity into action. And because of that, you learn to trust it. Maybe even more than you realized. You walk back slowly. Sit again. And now the truth deepens. You didn't just get used to activity. You got used to defining yourself through it. That sentence lands deeper than the one before. Because now it is no longer about what you do. It is about where your sense of self comes from. You think about how often you feel most like yourself when something is happening. When there is pressure. When there is movement. When there is something to engage with. In those moments, there is no confusion. No hesitation. No searching. You act. And the action creates clarity. But now, the question becomes unavoidable. If action creates clarity, then what happens when there is no action? If responding is where you know yourself, then who are you when nothing needs to be answered? That is not a poetic question. It is the actual psychological center of this episode. Because this is where trust breaks down. Not in crisis. In openness. Not under pressure. In the absence of it. Not because you cannot handle life. Because you do not yet know how to recognize yourself outside the mode of handling it. You lean forward again. hands loosely clasped. And another layer appears. You didn't build a stable sense of self. You built a responsive one. That sentence is one of the most important in the entire piece. Because it is brutally clean. A stable sense of self exists before action. A responsive sense of self appears because of action. A stable self remains in stillness. A responsive self waits for activation. A stable self does not disappear when the task ends. A responsive self goes dim the moment there is nothing to respond to. And that is exactly what you are feeling. You are not unstable. You are undefined without something to activate you. That distinction matters. Because undefined feels frightening when you have spent years mistaking responsiveness for identity. You sit there longer. And the pattern becomes undeniable. When something external appears, you know who you are. When nothing external appears, that certainty thins out. Not because you became weak. Because your self-recognition was built in motion. Your chest tightens slightly. Because now the personal truth arrives. You're not unstable. You're undefined without something to respond to. That sentence cuts cleaner than, I feel lost. Because, lost, still sounds vague. This is not vague. It is structural. You have built trust in yourself as someone who answers. Someone who reacts. Someone who engages. But not yet as someone who simply remains. That is why calm feels strange. Not because it contains danger. Because it contains no role. No instruction. No urgency. No clear version of you to step into. You stand again. Walk into the kitchen. Pour water. Drink slowly. And as you do, another realization surfaces. You've never practiced being yourself without a role. That lands quietly. But it changes everything. Because now, this is no longer a character flaw. It is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is not proof that you are broken, weak, unstable, or incapable. It is a developmental gap. A part of the self that never had to fully form because life kept giving you roles to stand inside. The solver. The responder. The organizer. The one who handles. The one who knows what to do. But when those roles fall silent, what remains? That is the question calm is forcing you to face. Not, can you relax? Not, why are you restless? But, can you still recognize yourself when nothing is asking you to become someone? You walk back slowly. Sit again. And the final realization of this moment settles in. You don't trust yourself in calm because you don't recognize yourself there. That sentence lands last. And maybe hardest. Because now the problem is fully visible. Calm is not exposing a weakness. It is exposing an undeveloped relationship. A relationship with yourself that was never built independently of pressure, movement, and demand. And now, for the first time in a long time, you are being asked to meet that version of yourself. Not the one who reacts. Not the one who solves. Not the one who knows exactly what to do next. Just, the one who remains when nothing is happening. And that is why this feels so unfamiliar. Not because you are failing. Because you are meeting a version of yourself you have never fully learned how to trust. Evening is where it becomes undeniable. The day gives you structure. Movement. Direction. Even small things are enough to hold your attention in place. A message. A task. A conversation. Something that tells you what to do next. And inside that structure, you don't question yourself. You move. You respond. You act. And that action creates a kind of certainty. A quiet sense that you know who you are because you know what to do. But evening removes that. It doesn't take anything from you. It just stops giving. The house quiets. The light softens. The day releases its grip. And suddenly, there is nothing left to tell you who to be next. You sit down. Hands resting loosely together. The room still. No urgency. No pressure. No demand. And for a moment, everything is exactly as it should be. And yet, you don't feel settled inside it. Not fully. There's a gap. Subtle. But unmistakable. You shift slightly. Adjust your posture. Let your shoulders drop. Try to relax deeper into the chair. But something inside you doesn't follow. Not because you're tense. Because you don't know how to land. That sentence lands quietly. But it holds. You don't know how to land in a moment that doesn't require you. You lean forward slightly. Elbows on your knees. And the realization begins to sharpen. When something is happening, you don't have to ask who you are. The situation answers that for you. You become the one who responds. The one who handles. The one who moves things forward. And that role gives you clarity. But now, there is no role. No prompt. No direction. And without it, your sense of self begins to thin out. Not disappear. Just, lose definition. You feel it. Not as panic. Not as anxiety. As a subtle disorientation. Like standing in a space without edges. Nothing to hold on to. Nothing to orient around. Nothing to push against. You reach for your phone. Not because you need it. Because it gives you something immediate. Something defined. Something that pulls your attention back into a structure you understand. You scroll. Briefly. Mindlessly. Then stop. Lock it. Put it down. And the moment returns. Unchanged. Still quiet. Still open. Still asking nothing from you. And again, you don't feel stable inside it. You lean back slowly. Exhale. And the rupture deepens. You don't trust yourself when nothing is asked of you. That sentence lands harder than expected. Because it removes the last excuse. This is not about boredom. Not about distraction. Not about needing stimulation. It is about trust. You trust yourself when there is something to respond to. Because responding is where you recognize yourself. But when there is nothing to respond to, what are you trusting? There is no action to confirm who you are. No decision to anchor you. No movement to stabilize you. Just, you. Unstructured. Unprompted. Unverified. And that is where the discomfort lives. You sit there longer. And another layer surfaces. You've never had to stay here long enough to build trust in this version of yourself. The version that is not reacting. Not solving. Not organizing. Not becoming anything specific. Just, existing without instruction. You stand. Walk slowly into the kitchen. Open the fridge. Look inside. Close it again. The movement is automatic. But now you see it clearly. You're not doing something. You're escaping something. Not chaos. Not stress. Absence of direction. You walk back. Sit again. And the pattern becomes undeniable. When nothing is happening, you try to create something. Not because you need to. Because you don't know how to remain without it. You lean forward. Hands loosely clasped. And the sharpest realization surfaces. You don't just feel unstable in calm. You feel unrecognizable to yourself. That lands deep. Because this is no longer about environment. It's about identity. The version of you that you trust, is the one who does something. The one who moves. The one who engages. The one who answers. But the version of you that simply sits in stillness, has never been given enough time to become familiar. And unfamiliar, does not feel safe. Even if nothing is wrong. You sit there longer. The room quiet. The light low. And the emotional layer arrives. Not loud. Not overwhelming. But undeniable. You've spent years becoming someone who is reliable in motion, but undefined in stillness. You feel that now. Not as a thought. As something real. Something you can no longer ignore. Because now you can see it. In the way your attention moves. In the way your body shifts. In the way your mind searches for something to attach to. In the way you leave before the moment fully settles. You exhale slowly. And the final line of the rupture settles in. You don't feel unstable because something is wrong. You feel unstable because you've never learned how to trust yourself when nothing is asking you to be someone. The room stays quiet. Nothing changes. But now, you see it clearly. And once you see that, you cannot go back to not noticing it. After that realization, something shifts. Not outside. Nothing changes in the room. Nothing changes in the moment. But the way you interpret it, does. Because the question is no longer, why do I feel off when nothing is wrong? The question becomes more precise. More uncomfortable. More honest. What have I been calling stability this whole time? You sit back slowly. Let that question stay. Because your first instinct still tries to answer it the way it always has. Stability is when things are under control. When you know what to do. When you can respond quickly. When you can handle what's in front of you. When nothing overwhelms you. That has always been your definition. And it has worked. For a long time. It made you capable. Reliable. Strong. But now, in this quiet moment, that definition begins to feel incomplete. Not wrong. Just, not enough. You look around again. Nothing is out of place. Nothing is unstable. The moment itself, is steady. And yet, you don't feel that steadiness internally. That's when the separation becomes clear. Stability in your environment, is not the same as stability in yourself. That lands clean. Because it exposes the gap. You've been measuring stability externally. Through what is happening. Through what you can manage. Through what you can respond to. But internal stability, is something else entirely. It is not based on activity. It is not based on clarity. It is not based on knowing what to do next. It exists, before any of that. You lean forward slightly. Elbows on your knees. And the truth sharpens. You didn't build stability. You built control. That sentence should land hard. Because it redefines everything. Control feels like stability. It creates order. Predictability. Direction. But control requires something to act on. Something to shape. Something to respond to. And when there is nothing to control, it disappears. Along with the sense of stability you thought it was giving you. You sit there longer. And another layer surfaces. You've been confusing responsiveness with groundedness. That distinction matters. Because responsiveness depends on input. Groundedness does not. Responsiveness activates when something happens. Groundedness remains when nothing does. And for a long time, you have lived almost entirely inside the first. You stand. Walk slowly toward the window. Look outside. Movement everywhere. Everything directed. Everything going somewhere. And suddenly, you see the pattern more clearly. Your internal world has been structured the same way. Always oriented toward something. Always moving toward the next point. Always anchored by what needs to be done. And now, you are in a moment that offers none of that. No direction. No demand. No reason to move. And instead of feeling stable, you feel undefined. You walk back slowly. Sit again. And the realization deepens. You didn't just rely on activity. You depended on it to feel like yourself. That lands heavier than expected. Because now it is not about behavior. It is about identity. Activity has been your reference point. Your way of knowing, I'm here. I'm functioning. I'm okay. But without that reference, you are left with something more difficult. Presence without confirmation. A version of yourself that is not being validated by action. You lean back slightly. And another layer becomes visible. Calm is not removing stability. It is revealing whether it was ever there without something to support it. That is the twist. Not dramatic. But fundamental. Because now calm is no longer the problem. It is the condition that exposes the truth. You don't feel unstable because calm is empty. You feel unstable because calm removes everything you've been using to define yourself. You sit there longer. Letting that settle. Because it is not a comfortable realization. It is not something you can quickly fix. But it is precise. And precision changes how you move next. You lean forward again. Hands loosely clasped. And the final layer of this moment becomes clear. You were never as stable as you thought. You were supported. That sentence lands quietly. But it carries weight. Supported by structure. By movement. By demand. By roles. By things that required you to step into a certain version of yourself. And without those supports, you are not broken. You are simply unsupported in a part of yourself that was never fully built. That changes everything. Because now the goal is not to fix calm. Not to add more structure. Not to keep yourself constantly engaged so you can feel stable again. The goal becomes something else entirely. To build a sense of self that does not depend on something happening. You sit there longer. The room quiet. The light steady. And for the first time, this does not feel like a problem. It feels like a direction. Not something to escape. Something to learn. Because now you understand something clearly. Stability is not what you do when something is happening. It is who you are when nothing is. And that is something you are only just beginning to discover. The shift doesn't begin with a decision. It doesn't start with a plan. There is no moment where you suddenly say, I'm going to become stable now. It doesn't work like that. Because what you are facing here is not a behavior problem. It's a relationship. A relationship with yourself in the absence of direction. And relationships don't change through force. They change through exposure. Through time spent in a place you used to leave too quickly. You sit in the same chair. The same quiet. The same stillness that felt slightly disorienting before. Nothing has changed around you. But something has changed in how you're sitting inside it. Because now, you're not trying to escape the feeling. You're trying to understand it. You lean back slightly. Let your body settle into the chair. Not forcing relaxation. Just, not holding yourself forward the way you usually do. Even that feels unfamiliar. Because you're used to being slightly engaged. Slightly ready. Slightly leaning into whatever comes next. Now, there is no next. And instead of creating one, you stay. That is where it begins. Not doing more. Not fixing the feeling. Staying inside it for a few seconds longer than you normally would. At first, that doesn't feel like progress. It feels like uncertainty. A lack of clarity. A space that doesn't tell you what to do with yourself. Your mind moves. Of course it does. It offers something. A task. A thought. A direction. Something to step into. And for a long time, that was the moment you left. The moment you followed it. Now, you notice it. And you don't follow it immediately. That is the shift. Small. But structural. You stay where you are. Not because you're forcing yourself to. Because you are finally seeing what happens if you don't leave. You sit there longer. And something uncomfortable becomes visible. Not anxiety. Not stress. Something quieter. A sense of not quite knowing what to do with yourself. A subtle lack of identity when no role is active. And instead of escaping that, you stay with it. That is the work. Not creating a new version of yourself. Allowing yourself to meet the version that has always been there but never fully experienced. You lean forward slightly. Elbows on your knees. And your attention turns inward. Not analyzing. Not fixing. Just, not leaving. You begin to notice how quickly your system tries to restore structure. A thought about what needs to be done later. A small urge to check something. A subtle need to move your body. None of these are urgent. But they feel necessary. Because they give you something to stand inside. You see that now. And instead of following them, you let them remain incomplete. Unresolved. Present, but not acted on. That is new. You stand. Walk slowly into the kitchen. Fill a glass of water. Drink. And as you do, you stay inside the action. Not moving ahead of it. Not turning it into the next step. Just, letting it be what it is. A simple moment. With no role attached to it. No outcome. No identity to perform. And something subtle happens. The moment doesn't become more interesting. It becomes more real. Because you are not using it to become someone. You are simply inside it. You walk back slowly. Sit again. And the same quiet returns. But now, it doesn't feel exactly the same. Not because it changed. Because you didn't immediately step out of it. You stayed long enough to feel the edge of discomfort, and not leave. That matters more than anything else. Because this is where trust begins. Not when you feel good. Not when everything is clear. When you remain even when nothing is defining you. You sit there longer. And the urge to move doesn't disappear. It softens. It becomes less immediate. Less controlling. And you realize something important. You don't need to eliminate the impulse to create structure. You need to stop obeying it automatically. That distinction changes everything. Because now, you're not trying to become someone who never needs direction. You're becoming someone who can exist without immediately searching for it. You lean back slowly. And another layer settles in. You don't need to create stability. You need to stay long enough for it to form without external support. That sentence lands quietly. But it holds. Because now it's not theoretical. It's happening. Right. Here. In this moment. You feel it. Not as confidence. Not as certainty. As something more subtle. A quiet sense that you can remain even when nothing is guiding you. And that is unfamiliar. But not wrong. You stand. Walk toward the window. Look at your reflection in the glass. Not analyzing. Not evaluating. Just, seeing yourself there. Without a role. Without a task. Without something to respond to. And for a moment, that version of you doesn't feel as undefined as it did before. Still unfamiliar. But slightly more real. You walk back slowly. Sit again. And the final understanding of this moment settles in. You don't build trust in yourself through action alone. You build it by staying with yourself when there is nothing to do. Even if it feels unclear. Even if it feels incomplete. Even if it feels like you don't quite know who you are yet. Because that is where that version of you begins to form. Not in motion. In stillness. Not in reaction. In presence. And the longer you stay there, the less foreign it becomes. The next day doesn't feel different. Not in any obvious way. Nothing has shifted outside of you. The same light comes through the window. The same quiet sits in the room. The same kind of moments are waiting for you, the way they always have. And you move into them the way you always do. But something small has changed. Not in what you do. In how quickly you leave. You wake up. Sit on the edge of the bed. And for a moment, nothing happens. That moment used to be invisible. Just a gap. A transition. Something to move through. But now, you feel it. Not as something important. As something real. A moment that exists before anything asks you to become someone. And immediately, the pattern begins. The familiar pull. The quiet instinct to get up quickly. To start something. To move into a role that makes you feel defined again. It's still there. That hasn't changed. It doesn't need to. But this time, you don't follow it right away. You stay on the edge of the bed for a second longer. Then another. And nothing breaks. Nothing collapses. Nothing becomes unclear because you didn't rush forward. The moment holds. You stand. Walk into the hallway. The mirror catches your reflection. You pause. Not to check anything. Not to fix anything. Just to remain there without a reason. That still feels unfamiliar. But it doesn't feel wrong. You move into the kitchen. Fill the kettle. Turn it on. The sound fills the space. Before, this is where you would have left. Reached for your phone. Created movement. Given yourself something to respond to. Now, you notice the impulse. Before it becomes action. That matters. Because this is where the pattern used to run without you. You feel the urge to move. To check. To engage. And instead of following it, you let it stay unresolved. Just for a few seconds longer than you're used to. And something subtle happens. The moment doesn't become more interesting. It becomes more defined. Not because it changed. Because you stayed. You hear the sound of the water. Not as background. As something that exists because you are actually here to notice it. You rest your hand lightly on the counter. Not doing anything. Not preparing the next step. Just remaining. And for the first time, this doesn't feel like a gap you need to move through. It feels like something you had been moving past too quickly to recognize. You pour the water. Sit down. The same chair. The same space. The same quiet. Nothing has changed. And yet, this moment does not feel as unstable as it did before. Not because you fixed it. Because you didn't leave it. You take a sip. Set the cup down. And your mind begins to move again. Of course it does. It suggests something. A task. A thought. A direction. Something to step into. And this time, you don't try to stop it. You don't push it away. You don't turn this into a test of how calm you can be. You simply notice it, and you don't follow it immediately. You stay. That's all. You stay while the impulse to become someone is still present. And that is new. Because before, you became someone the moment the impulse appeared. Now, there is space. A small gap between the urge and the action. And inside that gap, something begins to form. Not confidence. Not certainty. Something quieter. Something that doesn't need to prove itself. A version of you that is not being defined by what needs to be done next. You move through the morning. Small actions. Simple movements. Nothing dramatic. And inside those moments, you begin to see it everywhere. The exact point where you used to step into a role. The exact second where you used to define yourself through action. The exact place where you used to feel stable because something was asking something from you. And now, you pause there. Not every time. Not perfectly. But enough to feel the difference. You notice a quiet moment. No demand. No direction. And for once, you don't rush to become something inside it. You let yourself remain undefined for just a little longer. And something shifts. Not outwardly. Internally. That undefined space doesn't feel as empty. It feels open. You sit again later that day. The light softer now. The room familiar. And there is no urgency to move past the moment. No pressure to find something to do. No need to create a version of yourself that fits the situation. Because now, you understand something you didn't before. You don't need to become someone in every moment to feel like yourself. That lands quietly. But it changes everything. You lean back slightly. The quiet holding. Not empty. Not incomplete. Just, there. And for the first time, you are not trying to fill it. Not trying to shape it. Not trying to step into something that makes it easier to understand. You are letting it exist without needing to become anything inside it. And that is where something new begins. Not dramatic. Not visible. But real. Because now, you are not relying on the moment to define you. You are allowing yourself to remain even when nothing is asking you to be someone. You reach for the light. Pause for a second. Not because you're unsure. Because you are aware of the moment itself. And in that brief pause, everything becomes simple. There is nothing missing. There is nothing unclear. There is nothing you need to move toward. This is it. A moment where nothing is being asked of you. And for the first time, that does not feel like instability. It feels like space. You turn off the light. The room goes dark. But nothing feels empty in the darkness. If anything, something feels closer there. Because for the first time, you are not stepping out of the moment as soon as it begins. You are staying. Not as someone who is reacting. Not as someone who is solving. Not as someone who knows exactly what to do next. Just, as yourself. And in that staying, something quiet but undeniable finally takes shape. You don't need the moment to tell you who you are. You are already there. Even when nothing is happening.